although whether it is too old-fashioned or too clever and modern, it is most likely to be inappropriate and unseemly in both cases, because it does not accord with the principles of the middle way of Dhamma, which is truly sufficient and appropriate. But to be old-fashioned like the above bhikkhu makes one feel sorry for him. Discussions of Dhamma. Up to the present time, the conversations that take place between Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus has always been something that supports faith and is a valuable opportunity for those who are listening to learn. As it says in the Mangala Sutta, Galena Dhamma Sākatsa etam Mangalam Uttamang. Discussing Dhamma at the right occasion is one of the greatest blessings. Because the behavior and attitude which each one of them displays and which is most admirable comes from their aim of attaining the truth of Dhamma, and the value and help that they may get from what they learn by asking questions of each other. It is also regardless of the conventions of who is more senior in the number of vassa they have been in the order. In regard to the above, I who am writing this would like to express my admiration for the Dhamma conversations, the Dhammasāgata, which they have, and which follow the ways of the truly wise and leads one to have faith in them. This is completely different from the manner of those of whom merely to see them makes one feel disheartened. And as time goes on, they are becoming more and more widespread, to the point where some bhikkhus have called such conferences as they indulge in conferences of spittle in flood. If, however, there is a Dhamma conference which conforms to the ways of Dhamma conversation, Dhammasāgata, it should reach a reasoned conclusion and full acceptance. This is said with full knowledge of the fact that we Buddhists still variously have kilesas in us, but we are also intent on the truth of Dhamma. So when I know of good or evil of any kind, I have put down whatever comments and criticisms come from other people. For when one only criticizes oneself, it is not likely to do much in the way of stirring up one's kilesas of self-opinionatedness, and one has to depend on other people to help one do this. If one is intent on truly cleaning out the bad things within oneself, one should be able to get value from both praise and blame. Therefore I have written about both what is right and good, as well as what is wrong and evil in Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus, because I hope that value will be gained from both sides. But I am certainly not offering criticism for the purpose of bringing discredit and harm to anyone at all. What makes the Dhamma conversation of the Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus really praiseworthy is their intended purpose, which is to pick up hints and teachings from the true Dhamma, which each of them gives forth without any conceit or opinionatedness at all, even though they variously still have kilesas within them. For they talk based on the ground level, the bhumi, of their chittas, and of the Dhamma which arises out of the citta bhavana which they have been practicing. So they may talk about karnika samadhi, or upachara samadhi, or appanna samadhi, depending on what level their practice is reached. And if they have any doubts, they ask about them one after another, while those who understand answer them and clear each problem one by one until they fully understand. It is much the same in the field of punya, which has different levels in the same way as samadhi. For if any of them has a problem concerning punya at any particular level, in connection with whatever they are currently investigating, and they cannot get past this point, one who understands, or who has already gone past this point, will explain it point by point. He will explain it just where this bhikkhu is unsure of the way, until he understands it in the same way as the other levels which he has already understood. These Dhamma conversations amongst Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus, which take place in accordance with the various levels of Dhamma, are quite delightful, because the questions come out of the heart of the questioner who has been doing the practice and has experienced various things, and the answer also comes from the heart of one who has done the practice and experienced the same sort of things. Both of them have seen for themselves the true facts which have come from the practice, and this is an opportunity for them to go on gaining more and more from it. One day, one bhikkhu talks about one thing. Another day or time, another bhikkhu talks about another thing. So they keep changing about, continually passing on what they know to others, because different bhikkhus practice differently and know about different aspects of the practice, both inwardly and externally. In these Dhamma conversations which arise from knowing within the heart, even though the one who explains his situation and asks questions may be very much junior to the other in years, vassa, He tells his story and asks his questions with a sure confidence and a certainty in what he knows and asks about. He has no fear, nervousness, or anxiety, apprehensive that the other bhikkhu will question him or pick holes in what he has said. He just speaks and asks in accordance with the way he feels, and both sides are ready to accept whatever is reasonable. If at any point the reasoning is still unacceptable, they go over that point, hammering out the meaning until it is properly understood. Then they can go beyond it, without either side gaining or losing any status or virtue, which is what happens when the way of the world is hidden in Dhamma, for then it departs from the hope of gaining understanding from each other. But the correct way is that whether right or wrong in any way, the one who reveals himself or asks the questions does so in whatever way he feels to be appropriate, and which explains what he has experienced, without being afraid of being wrong. Those who are listening to him set themselves to listen to the point which that bhikkhu has brought up as a question, and they are not interested in anything more than the Dhamma question which is right before them. Whoever is talking and listening, all of them are willing to listen attentively to the Dhamma of each other from beginning to end in an even manner, without showing any sign of boredom, contempt, or dissatisfaction with the level of citta and Dhamma of each other. All of them talk together with a purity of heart, with a real hope that they may gain knowledge and assistance from each other. When the one who has brought up his story and asked his question gets some disagreement at any point from those who are listening to him, this point must become a problem for his homework, a problem which he must immediately start thinking about so as to correct it and adjust his understanding until he feels sure about it and until the problem has been resolved to his full satisfaction and does not contradict the Acharya who showed him the way. In addition, he must understand the question in the way the Acharya has explained it before he can let go of it and pass beyond it. Generally speaking, any of them who meet with disagreement do not feel disheartened about it, but rather tend to become even more interested and concerned about such a question. In this way, the Dhamma conversation amongst those who also practice in this same way is likely to bring blessings to them, even as it says in the verse of Dhamma, Dhamma conversation at the right time is one of the greatest blessings. But conversation which is an enemy or which destroys what is expressed in the foregoing Dhamma verse, which in Bali is Galena Dhammasaga Chayetam Mangalam Uttamang, is likely to be of the kind which arouses the kilesas, or the type which takes pride in the kilesas, rather than being directed towards anything useful in Dhamma. But this that I have written just accords with the ways of the forest. So please don't take it too seriously, because the word forest or the wilderness proclaims its nature without needing to say any more. Whatever will bring benefit to oneself by way of Dhamma in any way is a way that one should try to scoop up with all one's strength and effort. For even though the way may be subject to the criticism and blame of others who have kilesas of the kind which like to criticize so as to raise up themselves or to destroy others rather than for the sake of Dhamma, they will not be able to eradicate that way. If it was possible for them to eradicate that way or method, the Lord Buddha who practiced the way in the midst of the exponents of all sorts of different views and opinions, which should be called the storehouse of kilesas, would most likely not have been able to slip through them and become the great teacher of all us Buddhists. Only truth can triumph over all falsehood, which means that because of truth, one can triumph over self and the world. One cannot get away from truth, and those who are firmly connected to Buddhism should also be firmly committed to truth, which is the heart of Buddhism. Therefore, Dhamma conversation and any of the ways of practicing Dhamma, when they are actually done, can make the kilesas afraid and dispel them from the heart. So doing those things is a blessing to oneself, although the kilesas will not see it as a blessing, though this is not a problem. But generally we tend to make ourselves a blessing to the kilesas rather than to ourselves, and we should beware of this kind of blessing if it arises frequently, because it may be dragging us down even while we think we are progressing. This is the way of those who are crooks, who cheat, rob, or swindle to gain the wealth of others and turn it into their own wealth and blessing, thinking that they are clever and have a lot of merit and virtue. They pride themselves that they must have powerful and good tendencies of Kamma, which has brought them a heap of money as big as a mountain, and they pore over their accounts of the money they have in the bank every day without fail. But in truth, the whole of this is only a blessing which lasts as long as they are still breathing, a blessing of clay stuck to their heads which will lead them to ruin and disintegration. All those who are wise and know the way have no doubt whatsoever as to what kind of blessing this is. To judge what is a true blessing, the Acharyas have taught that one should judge one's motives for doing whatever actions one does, to see in what way they tend at all times throughout the day and day by day. These actions will manifest in one's body, speech, and mind variously on each occasion, and whether they give rise to blessings or the opposite, which are the results that come from them, will depend on and accord with these actions, which cannot be separated from those results. From what has been said above, the blessing of Dhamma talk which accords with the characteristics of happiness, Sīlaratano in the heart, would seem to be a joyful thing in those who practice the Dhamma, which they talk about in the manner of Dhammasāgata. This is the result which each of them gets, and which accords with the above Dhamma verse, and it is a method which steadily brings relief and dispels the kilesas within them. There are times when it so happens that a number of the bhikkhus come from the hills and the forests which give them happiness and contentment of heart, and they all meet together at the same time. An occasion such as this is a good opportunity for them to discuss various aspects of Dhamma together, in addition to which they have a longing to do so, for this is a rare occasion that only happens once in a long time. To begin with, there will generally be questions from the more junior bhikkhus, with the most senior bhikkhus starting off the proceedings with some preliminary talk, and asking the first bhikkhu to start off with the way of practice, which means his citta bhavana as he has experienced it. When he has finished giving an account of his practice, the senior bhikkhu may sometimes question him, and make some comments and add some Dhamma explanations to correct him in some places, and to emphasize the Dhamma which he had understood correctly, so as to bring out its full scope and implications. The other bhikkhus whose turn had not yet come would be sitting quietly, while listening with calm hearts, so as to pick up ways and means from the talk between the first questioner and the one who is waiting to explain. This conversation which takes place is most strange and wonderful, for one would never have thought that the Dhamma could be practiced by different people in so many different ways, with such a variety of different experiences in all sorts of ways and directions. Yet when they talk, it turns out that it can all be interpreted in terms of Dhamma, such as I have experienced in some aspects, as if our hearts were all together as one, and the Dhamma is also one and the same. For the Dhamma has many aspects, and the heart has many spheres, and since each person has a heart, one should hardly expect there to be such unanimity and harmony as in fact there is. But whether they speak of the Bhuta and ghosts, of the Devata, about the Dhamma truths in some of its aspects, about the methods of Panya, wisdom, in some of its aspects, or about various different kinds of kilesas, they can all understand each other, as if they all saw it together at the same moment. Therefore all those present, whether sitting and listening, whether talking, or asking questions, or those who are listening to make a critical evaluation, all of them would probably gain something useful and valuable from the question in the same way as if the bhikkhu who was making comments was pointing at each one of them for them alone to hear individually. The only exceptions would depend on the ability of each one of them who was listening, for depending on the level of their ability, they may or may not be able to understand some parts of it. But when they listen to the explanations which are directly in answer to the questions and problems which are put forward, all of them who are listening are able to gain value from them, because all of them are in the same basic situation that should enable them to gain value equally. This is like those instances which we can read about in the texts, where the Lord Buddha was setting right and elucidating a question concerning Dhamma which someone had asked him. At the same time, there were others present who were able to benefit from what he taught, even to the extent of attaining the path, fruition, and nibbana in some cases, although it was someone else's question and the answer was given to that person. This can happen because Dhamma is neutral and quite impartial to the world, so it can give value to anyone who is able to receive it, regardless of the time or place of those people who are in the right basic situation to be able to accept it. A Dhamma conversation which takes place at a time when several bhikkhus are sitting together is likely to be of value to all who hear it. However, there are many types of question or problem which may be made about external or internal things of endless varieties, some of which can be made public and others which should not, for they may be difficult or inappropriate to discuss in public. But whatever type of question it is, the questioner should know for himself whether it is the type which may be revealed for others to hear, or whether it should be reserved for an opportunity when he can discuss it privately with his teacher at a suitable time. All these questions or problems are concerned only with citta bhavana. For when one is practicing the way all the time in all sorts of situations, in the spheres of both samadhi and panya, questions and problems are bound to arise all the time, regardless of one's situation. When problems or Dhamma of some kinds arise from the heart, the owner will know the answer for himself right away. There are other kinds which, when they arise, the owner will have to spend some time investigating them before he understands and can pass them by one. But there are also other kinds of problems which arise and the owner has no knowledge of how to cure and correct them, so he must depend on someone else to help and advise him. Some of the problems that arise concern things which are critical and dangerous, and he must solve them quickly. If he cannot deal with them himself, he must hurry off to find a teacher, an acharya, who can help and correct him. Otherwise, if he just leaves it alone, it may lead him into false delusions and spoil him entirely. But whatever problem arises, mindfulness and wisdom are factors of Dhamma that are essential in every case for curing or promoting the problems which arise in oneself. One must bring mindfulness and wisdom in to test and examine, so as to become quite certain that one understands where one thinks one is right or wrong by way of reason, but not by understanding or mere fancy which is based on one's own emotional bias and which one then grasps and holds on to, believing it to be true. Before one is ready to accept the answer to each problem, it must be proved by wisdom using the ways of reason. This is why Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus go in search of the acharyas and respect them and have faith in them and listen closely to what they say, which is quite different from the way of study bhikkhus. Because the questions and problems which arise from citta bhavana are specific and important, and they must be dealt with only by an acharya who has gone through the same things himself, for him to be able to resolve them. Someone who has never practiced bhavana cannot be expected to resolve them, even though he may have studied the texts extensively, for the problems that arise from citta bhavana are, generally speaking, not directly in line with what is learnt by study. Supposing a problem is described in a concealed and roundabout fashion, one cannot say that it is completely at variance with what is learnt by study, but nor can one say that it is the same thing. This is why there are great difficulties for those who have never gone beyond the level of study to investigate and find the truth. For talk of this kind, as I have described it, will probably not be understood by those who have never come across it before and never practiced bhavana. In fact, they are quite likely to laugh at it, while saying that this is just the uneducated way of those who live in the wilds, and that it lacks any basis. But the truth is as I have described it amongst those who practice the way. As for those bhikkhus who have had some results from the principles of bhavana, they will immediately understand as soon as the truth is revealed to them.